Let's jump right in. $790 million. That is a staggering amount of money. And yet, I have heard, and I'm sure you have, the pushback from a lot of people in this town who believe somehow St. Louis got the short end of the stick. So my first question, have you heard it, and what is your response to that?
Well, the argument from the elected leaders, who the lawyers that filed the suit in 2017 represent, the mayor of St. Louis, we spoke with her yesterday, and County Executive Sam Page spoke yesterday. They say, they took this settlement because, yes, they could have gone to trial in the city of St. Louis, probably would have won if it was put up to a jury in the city of St. Louis. But then the NFL would have appealed, and we would have been waiting another couple of years, and they could have appealed again. And again, we have an endless appeal system in this country. I mean, look, already all the appeals and legal maneuvering, it took, 4+ years to get to this point. So they say, Mayor Jones said, look, the advice of our lawyers, and County Executive Sam Page said the same thing pretty much. The advice of our lawyers was take the settlement. It's, more than Kroenke offered initially. You get the money now. You get a check now. And you don't have to deal with the uncertainty because, we would have maybe won in the city, and yeah, you could have, dragged the NFL and Kroenke through the mud, but then what if the NFL won on appeal, or they reduced the settlement, down to $100 million or so on appeal? So then where would we be? So they took the sure money.
So has it been determined, well, the net gain is going to be what, 525 to 530 million when you back out the legal fees? So has it been determined how the remaining net will be divided? Will it be divided evenly? Will the city get more than the county? How will that part of it shake out?
Once you take, the attorneys took this on a contingency basis. Two of the, better known, more prominent law firms in town, Dowd Bennett and Blitz Barjay and Joyce, and they said 35% of whatever they got, so they'll get $276.5 million plus expenses. We don't know what those expenses are yet. 4+ years of depositions and travel and all that. So around $500 million or so, and that's the next step. Over the next month or so, the city, the county, and the entity that owns the Dome, the Regional Convention Dome Authority, it's a long acronym. Those three parties have to figure out how to split up this $500 million. So we don't know yet. There's no pre-existing formula to that. So
okay.
Those negotiations are just starting.
And this is one of the main reasons why I asked you to come on, because now we are clearly into the politics of it. So you're on the City Hall beat. You've spoken with the mayor recently, or yesterday. You've spoken with the county executive. What sense did you get from after you talked with both of them? What are they thinking? What's their objective or agenda into getting the settlement and deciding how it's going to be divided?
Well, right now they were a little hesitant to talk about how to use the money because as they said yesterday, they don't know how much they're going to get. The mayor said, I'm not going to say we should use it for this or that until we aren't going to spend money before we have it. So and we'll see how they divide it up. Some people have pointed out, the county during the effort to keep the RAMS here in 2015, kind of opted out of the financing plan to build the stadium. The legal case, though, pointed out that the county was damaged by the loss of hotel taxes. So, the president of the St. Louis Board of Aldermen, Louis Reed, said yesterday, well, I think the city should get more. We were damaged more. We lost more sales tax and, hit to our restaurants and earnings tax from, salaries from the team and more so than the county and more so than the Dome Authority. So the city should get more. So we'll see how that shakes out. The Mayor Jones, and County Executive Page tend to get along pretty well. at least, on the outside. And Mayor Jones said as much yesterday. Look, I don't think these talks on how to divide up the money are going to be contentious. I think we'll be able to figure something out. And right now it sounds like, the Board of Aldermen and the county council aren't going to get involved. So there's fewer politicians in the room arguing over how to divide up this money, which maybe could help.
Well, on that note about the county's participation or lack thereof, when the effort was made to come up with a stadium plan at the last moment, I guess my question, and I'm kind of hesitant to ask, but do you see a scenario where the city and the county, they can't come to an agreement on how to divvy up its share or who gets what? Can you see a scenario where the city and the county would then sue one another, and then you see the CVC, they get involved in it? Because the first piece of business is deciding who gets what. And the way things work around here politically, that could take a year or two just to get to that point.
Yeah, we will see. I can't see them suing each other over it. I think they likely want to have as little drama as possible, at least, dividing up the money, because I'm sure there'll be political arguments when they're deciding how to spend it. But it remains to be seen. But at the same time, the lawyers who negotiated the settlement will also be in the room and with these talks. The lawyers who represent the city, the county, and the Dome Authority. And as we saw, the three parties agreed with their lawyers to take this settlement and take this sum of money. So maybe they will be willing to also listen to these lawyers who, are, when they say this is how much each party should get based on how much they were damaged, because they were building the case, and you've got to assume that they've got documentation showing the economic hit each party took based on the RAMS moving. So maybe they can make a factual argument to the three parties and say, this is how much everybody was damaged. This is, how we should divide things up.
So let's shift briefly to the CVC and their portion. Do you have any sense of how the CVC plans on using its piece of the pie when the money hits their account?
So slight clarification. So the CVC, the Convention and Visitors Commission, they are actually not technically a party to the suit. They lease the Dome and operate the Dome and use it as part of America's Center and the Convention Center. But the Dome itself is owned by an entity, kind of a standalone state statute created entity that was created to finance the Dome and build it and own it. So it's the Regional Convention and Sports Authority. It's a super long.
Yeah.
It's escaping me right now.
Does it have a nickname? Oh, let's make one up for it. Let's call them the folks. Yeah.
The Dome Authority is kind of the shorthand we use. So they're the third party, and they own the Dome. They work closely with the CVC, but they're their own entity, and basically their only job is to own the Dome and to pay off the debt issued in the 90s to build the Dome, which they did this year. We made our last payments on it, but they also are in charge of maintaining the Dome, and they get about $1 million a year each from the city and the county to maintain it, and $2 million a year from the state to pay for upkeep and maintenance. It's a big building. It's got utilities and maintenance, and might need a new roof at some point. So they get some money to do that. Long term, who knows? But because I didn't actually speak with any of them yesterday, and they're being quiet right now. But I would guess that they're going to use their share of this to set aside some money to make sure the Dome stays in good shape, because the CVC, which operates the Dome, does use it to sell conventions and get big groups here into town that can use a Dome as part of their conventions, which is a somewhat unique asset when you're looking at other convention centers around the country.
You obviously cover the beat. You talk with the folks in the county. You talk with the folks in the city. What do you get a personal sense of how this thing will play out politically, because the mayor, I'm sure she has great intentions, and I'm going to assume the county executive does. But they have folks to answer to. The mayor answers to the Board of Aldermen. The county executive answers to the county council. And those relationships at times can be acrimonious. So with that in mind, realistically, how do you see this thing politically? Because it's a shame. Well, I shouldn't say a shame. It's just going to be unfortunate that we get a blessing, a civic blessing, in the amount of $790 million. And it instead of uniting the area, it will further polarize it. Do you get a sense of that?
Well, uniquely this year, and last year, we kind of have had a preview of what it looks like when, local governments, our local governments get a big check, because they've gotten a couple of big checks already from the federal government from all the stimulus passed in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. So, over the summer, the city, the mayor, and the Board of Aldermen were kind of butting heads a little bit over spending plans. The county council and county executive page have butted heads a little bit, more so last year, over how to spend the pandemic relief money. So we've kind of seen, how this might play out. This is another big pot of money. It's not from the federal government. It's from this legal settlement. But, I would suspect there will be political arguments over how to spend it. But ultimately, those political arguments over the federal money, they have mostly, come to, the two parties, the legislative branch and the executives, they eventually reach some sort of compromise and, figure out how to spend the money so everybody can claim some victory. So I assume it'll play out kind of like that. There'll be some arguments for a while, and then they'll figure something out. And, God knows there's plenty of needs here in St. Louis to spend money on.
One quick question I have, and obviously this is a big thing pertaining to what you do. How much of this spending and actually decision making is going to be 100% out in the open, and how much of this might have to be kind of discovered sometimes maybe through some FOIA requests from people like you?
Well, in terms of actually appropriating the money, I mean that's gonna be debated at committee hearings at the Board of Aldermen and the County Council, and ultimately the full legislative bodies and the mayor and the county executive will have to sign off, and it'll have to go through the normal budgeting process, appropriations process that you'd see when they pass an annual budget. So we'll see how it's appropriated. Of course, you can always hide some things in the line items that maybe you can't see when you're spending a big chunk of money, and that's the kind of stuff that we try to pay attention to, make sure that's not being sent to wasted too much or sent to political cronies, things like that. But it should be debated out in the open. The thing we won't really see is these negotiations behind closed doors over the next couple of weeks on how they divvy up the money. They'll come out and say, this is what we've decided, but those negotiations, like the negotiations over the sum of money that the Rams and the NFL agreed to pay, are mostly probably going to be behind closed doors.
So that part will be behind closed doors, but at some point you would expect there would be some public participation. For instance, when the city got the money from the Fed, there were meetings. Hey, how should this money be used? The mayor had meetings all over town getting input from the citizens in the city. So now we're talking city and county. Do you anticipate some public involvement? And if so, to what degree?
I mean, it's very early in the process, so none of that's been announced. They aren't even talking about how to spend the money yet. But I would be surprised if the city and the county don't have some sort of public forum where people can weigh in. And since it will be going through the appropriations process, citizens can go and speak and weigh in and make public comments about how to spend the money. And I, like you said, I would guess that there will be some sort of, open public forum that each government would have outside of the normal appropriation process at their respective legislative bodies.
Well, there it is. Thank you so much for your time today, Jacob. Obviously, people can follow your writing on stltoday.com, also in Post-Dispatch. What's the Twitter account so people can follow along even closer?
Just at Jacob Barker, Barker like Bob.
There it is, Jacob Barker. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jacob.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
There it is. That is Jacob Barker. Like you said, you can follow him at Jacob Barker, writer for the Post-Dispatch and STLtoday.com. Going to be crucial to watch as all the reporting around this money, the appropriations, the discussions being had both publicly and privately about those discussions. Important to follow that there. So a big thank you to Jacob for joining us today. What do you think, Craig?
I live in the city, and I follow politics very closely.
That's unfortunate.
And, well, I don't have a life. And so just knowing what I know from following it so closely, I just don't see where this will be a seamless transaction. There are so many other factions with their own agendas and interests, and something that should be a positive can further alienate this community. And I'm just so afraid of it just because we have the history to look at and point to. And I'm hopeful. I'm wrong. Hopefully. I am so far off base, but I don't get a sense that I am. I'm not excited about this process because it can get very ugly. And there's a lot of money that we're talking about. There are needs all over the place. We have yet, the biggest hurdle is dividing it. Who gets what? And then after that big argument, then after who gets what they get, then what do we do with what we got? Will there be situations where once the city and the county both are paid out, will there be joint efforts? Here's one thing I'll put out, and with this money, we should be able to do this. One of the things that I hear, people avoid downtown at all costs. That's not true, but that is the image that we have. How about this? How about safety? And we can get into the police and
you bring up the drag race and street racing people do.
Here, let's start with something very basic. How about a separate police force for MetroLink? The funding will be there.
Oh, yeah.
And so that way, because at least you have people feeling safe using public transportation. That's a large part of attracting people downtown. Can they get downtown conveniently?
You gonna put in turnstiles?
Oh, absolutely. Well,
you gonna prosecute turnstile jumpers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wasn't here when MetroLink was built. I never understood why the idea, someone thought not having turnstiles was a good idea. I just couldn't believe that. So we're about, 25 years behind on that idea. Finally, someone, hey, maybe we should have turnstiles. Yeah, maybe you should have thought of this in 1994 or 1993.
Yeah, well, the reason that's asked, though, and I have a feeling this is probably a part of the conversation, and the reason why that we're still having a funding conversation is that how large of a chunk of funding, places like New York and stuff that have subway systems, how large of a chunk of funding they have to use for security around things like turnstile jumpers, and how little actual money is produced from, or how little money is actually lost from people, jumping turnstiles. And so it's the economic thing of people don't want there to be, people just getting free rides, but also at the same time, it's not economically viable to pay security to worry about that issue, which I'm sure is probably one of the issues that was there when they were first making it.
And this is why you have a police department. I'm not talking about security guards, and not to marginalize.
Sure. I'm just taking a wild guess at
that. Yeah. Well, for instance, and I'll point to something I have knowledge about, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, BART. BART has its own deputized police department. They go through the academy just like any other police officers do. They have arresting authority. They are a police department. You see uniformed officers on the trains, in the stations, on the platform.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, I understand why people think about that. That's necessary because it's from the get-go. It stops crime, and if you force people to actually pay for their tickets, maybe you can cut down on that kind of stuff as well. So I'm not completely against it. Let's get into the text line here. If you want to join us on the show today through the Maryville text line, you can 855-282-8255. Big thanks to Maryville University. Check them out at maryville.edu for all the services they offer out there. You can get your degree while you're working. You can get a degree while you're taking care of your family, all online, and they offer so many more bachelor's degrees, associate's degrees, and even more programs as they keep going. And hell, they keep offering more and more NCAA sports, which is pretty awesome. So check out maryville.edu and text us today at 855-282-8255 on the maryville.edu phone lines. If they even give the damn U City Trolley money, they should all be voted out of office. What a freaking waste. Yeah, we know that. I don't. The trolley thing is a completely different set, and I'm the guy who keeps trying to run that. Great job with the loop. Stop. Know when it's done, buddy. Exactly. Instead of spending tens of millions on expanding Metro, spend money on security for the current link so people would feel safer, or do both. We expand the Metro link to Madison County. That's from the 618. So you're informing me, yes, Mayor Tashara Jones will have a brilliant idea of just handing out $1,000 to poor residents if they haven't been given enough money in the past 2 years, and will accomplish nothing. I think just assuming, this person will come up with this idea because I hate politicians and I don't like the thing they've done in the past. Just a really, really reductive, completely pointless way to add to the conversation. Not anything against that texter. I think that's what the cynicism in St. Louis gives you. I understand why people in St. Louis are cynical. Let's just try to be a little bit more, maybe a little bit more positive when we're trying to actually, have a conversation and bring up ideas and things like that. 314, Craig, you have your head in a hole over the last year. The mayor and county executive answer to themselves only, much to the chagrin of the BOA and county council. I think we talked about this yesterday. The Board of Aldermen has shown that they only care about themselves as well, and I can't disagree with the county executive comment.
Well, and that's a large problem here. We're very good at pointing fingers, and we can point out what's wrong, and we're very weak when it comes to solutions. The biggest obstacle this area, this town, this metro area faces is the polarization. We can't get beyond it, and we continuously wonder how cities like Nashville, Louisville, Cincinnati, Indianapolis have leapfrogged us. Well, they work together. They don't work against one another. We're not at that point, and it seems like we are determined to be polarized. People like it. It's a conversation piece, but it doesn't move the needle. So whenever St. Louis, this company is looking for a new place for its headquarters. St. Louis is in the mix. St. Louis never wins anything like that because of this polarization. And we will always miss out. We will always be the bridesmaid, until we get this polarization resolved. We just have a faction of people who hold certain people in contempt. They have utter contempt for a certain demographic, and that polarizes the region, that keeps us from working together, and that pretty much relegates us to mid-level, midtown status.
Yeah, you're not going to get people to agree. You have to come up. You have to just frame things in a way that makes it see why it would be beneficial to them as well. That's what you have to do. Is all I can really think of, is because people don't change their mind. People don't become more accepting. People are pretty much set in their ways, as they are when they're adults and things like that.
And we have sample sizes to look at. We have sample sizes of other cities of comparable sizes who, for instance, Indianapolis, Indiana, has hosted a Super Bowl. St. Louis, Missouri will never host a Super Bowl. And so which city is more has a more deeper tradition, a more higher profile name-wise in history in the country? St. Louis or Indianapolis? Well, St. Louis is the gateway to the West.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. In this conversation, that doesn't really matter. That's everything. Everything about St. Louis's history is based off nothing that matters in the world anymore.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
That is the bingo.
So
that's
what?
the problem. And because of the polarization.
Think of some. No, that's not necessarily why. It's that things changed and we didn't change with them. And I don't know how much of the polarization is the fault of what was happening.
Yes, sir. It was all
the 70s.
Here's why we didn't change, Matt.
We screwed up the insurance and we blew the budget and we set ourselves up for failure in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we've been treading water since the mid 90s.
Well, even before then. Here's why. Because of the polarization. You cannot be successful in a city when you come up with ideas and plans, and in part of the plan is to cut off half of the people.
I think it's been incompetence.
Well, yes, incompetence breeds polarization.
Well, that's
Yeah.
It's polarized now, but we didn't get here because of polarization. We got here because people are dumb.
No, we got here polarization because if you want to exclude half the people who live here from stuff, it will never happen. We have all these great ideas. We want this mall, we want this, but we only want certain people to have access to it. We have to come up with ideas that clearly want to give everyone access to it.
That's an issue, but I don't think that's St. Louis's issue. That's a macro. We're talking about micro on this one when it comes to St. Louis, and I don't think that necessarily is the issue here in St. Louis. I think in a lot of larger ways that's a problem in our culture, but I don't think that's St. Louis specific, and I don't think that's an issue that Nashville isn't having or Indianapolis isn't having. I think that there's a lot more tangible, realistic, just the money's available. Cause and effect kind of things that have happened in those cities that haven't happened here in St. Louis. Because again, as much as I want to act like the problems in Splashback Deuce texted in, how much does it cost to merge the city and the county right now? Take that money, merge, and spread it where needed. Again, I want to think that this whole merging city county thing, which is again the root of a lot of the problems, is just because of some demographic issues. But it's not. There's people who are just. There are a lot of people in this world who have one issue in their life, and that's whether or not the bottom dollar on their wallet is different today than it was yesterday. That's all they care about. That's literally the only thing. And they can guss it up in whatever BS they try to say it actually is about for them. It's about their money, and it's about how much money is in their bank account. And that's why the merger won't happen, because people think it will directly affect their bank accounts. And so again, that's not polarization. That's just flat cash in how the world works. And sometimes I think we want to find the really complicated issue. And sometimes I really think, especially in this world, sometimes the reason is the money's not there. And if the money was there, it would be easier. Well,
I'll say this. Under the last mayoral administration in the city, the previous mayor, there was an effort, kind of underhanded, to do a merger. It's called Better Together. Okay, I went to some of those town halls, and it was insane, because I just literally saw people who live in West County, South County. They wanted nothing to do with the city.
Yeah.
Period. It was. The city had gone to hell in a handbasket. They didn't want anything to do with the city. The city was not worthy of anything. And this is the thing that keeps us. The main thing.
But I'm trying to say, a lot of those people, the only thing they think is that if you merge the city and the county, they're Afton or they're Glendale or what have you, taxes will go haywire and they will have to pay more money. That's the only reason a lot of those people are freaking out. Now, there are plenty of people who are freaking out because of much more nefarious issues in the fact that they are inherently jingoistic, xenophobic, racist, whatever word you want to use, about people who are not middle class and look like them. But there are. I'm not saying that those people do not exist, but I honestly believe those people are in the minority directly, and the majority of people are just complaining because they think it's going to change their property taxes. And that's all they care about, because their house is their one big asset. They've been told that's how to build their finances, and they're afraid if their property taxes takes a little bit of a hit, everything's going to crumble around them. So many people just care about their livelihood, which is, I'm not saying that as a negative thing.
No.
I'm just saying to be honest with it. And I don't think there's a problem with that.
There's not. But to get beyond that, you have to be a visionary and have vision. And if you're a one-issue person, you have no vision. That is it.
That I'll agree with.
And
that's why there's no vision connected to the ideas of merging or whatever you want to say it, because it's hard to think past what's going to happen in the next 6 months, because again, that's what's going to affect your livelihood.
And because
it's not wrong that people think that way, but it's tricky to get around it, I think.
It's it's not wrong that people think that way. It's wrong if that's the only thing they think about. Okay? Because now you're in a box and you can't get past it. And I'll say this before we go to break. Moses will part the Red Sea again before St. Louis City and County merge.
Yeah, like I said yesterday, I'll take I'll give anybody a $50 bet. I'll give you 5-1 odds. I'll take no, it won't happen. You can take yes, merger will happen in my lifetime. I'll take anybody who wants the bet. I'll give it to them. If I do a little bit better in my life, I'll happily up the bet because I just don't see it happening.